If you are brand new to sewing, this is the perfect project to start with. We are going to make a drawstring bag with one piece of fabric, and I'll show you how to make it so there are no raw edges showing. You can use this technique to make these bags in any size. I am using a fat quarter from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to press it to get out any wrinkles before starting. Now, to get the size of bag you want when it's finished, you'll take the measurement for the height where the opening will be and double that length because we'll be folding the bottom, and we'll cut it in just one strip. You'll also want to add 4 more inches because we will use 2 inches on either side to create the opening for the drawstring. So this fat quarter folded in half is 10.5 inches long, which means my finished bag will be 8.5 inches below the drawstring opening. Now for the width, I want it to be 5.5 inches, but I'm also adding an extra 1.25 inches to allow for a 5/8 inch seam allowance on each side of the bag. And you'll see why in just a little bit. So I'll cut it at 6.75 inches wide. So I just made sure my tops are even, and I'm cutting it right down the length, just one cut. Now you'll want to keep those top edges nice and straight, and then we're going to measure down 2 inches from that top edge and 5/8 inches in from the side edge and make a mark. And I'm using a fabric marking pen. And you're going to do this on each side and then clip or pin those top edges so there isn't any shifting when we sew it. So we are going to sew the side starting from that marked line down to the bottom of the bag with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And yes, we are keeping the right side of the fabric facing out because this will become a French seam. So make sure to backstitch at the beginning and at the end of the stitch. And then trim off that thread. And here is our first seam. And we're just going to repeat on the other side, starting from that line down to the bottom. Now that we have those two sides sewn, we can remove the clips. And we're going to flip the bag inside out, but first we're going to cut into that line that we drew. Do not clip into your stitch, but just clip right on that line, right into the 5/8 inch mark. So when we have both sides clipped, we can go ahead and flip it inside out. And again, this should measure that 5/8 inch. So when you turn the bag inside out, you want to make sure that you're getting those corners nice and square. So poke it out with your fingers and just make sure it's all the way at a 90-degree angle, and then roll those seams and make sure they're nice and flat. You really should press it, but I did not. Now we'll make the openings for the drawstring. So you'll have these 4 tabs at the top, and for each one we'll take and fold it in just under a 1/4 inch, and then we're going to fold it in again to meet the edge of that cut we made. And you'll see that in just a sec. So one small fold and then one fold that ends right at that cut. And then you can pin this in place. And again, you can use your iron and press these flat to make it easier if you need to. And let me show you that one more time. So we're going to just make a small fold, about a 1/4 inch, and then fold it so that it goes right to the edge of that cut that we made. Now, once all 4 tabs are folded in, we're going to sew each one down, and you want to make sure that the other side that you aren't sewing is folded back and out of the way. So I am sewing along that inside folded edge at about a 1/8 inch seam allowance, and I'll give you a closer look here. Okay, now that all 4 tabs are sewn down, we're going to take the top edge and make a fold at just about an 1/8 of an inch, and then a second fold at about a 1/4 inch, just like this. And again, we should be pressing these folds so they're nice and flat. And then we're going to fold that whole thing down to meet the bottom of that tab. Just like that. And I will go and press this both sides, and then we're going to sew right along that final folded edge. And it is important to press this part so everything is nice and flat. So here is my press fold, and it's all pinned in place. And again, I'm folding that other side back and out of the way so it doesn't get caught in my seam. If your bag is wide enough, you can do this part around the free arm of your sewing machine. And again, I'm sewing close to that folded edge at about a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And I do stop to check that the back side is still out of the way. Sewing is not a race, so take your time. And here is one finished drawstring opening, and we'll follow those same steps for the other side. Now for the French seam, which is not scary. It sounds scary, but it's not, which will take care of the raw edge on the inside, or the outside of our bag. We are going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which should come right up to the edge of our drawstring openings. So again, you should be pressing those seams. I'm just trying to get it as flat as possible here, but you will see that this should measure 3/8 inches if you did the 5/8 on each side. Now, if your machine allows, you can move your needle position over so that you avoid sewing over the bulk of those top tabs that we now have. So that's what I did. I just lowered my stitch width to move my needle over and just brought it right along that top tab, which is just about 3/8 inches. You can also trim down the original 1/4 inch seam and sew the second seam smaller than 3/8 inches. And now our raw edges are nicely encased in the seam. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So once you have both sides sewn, we can flip the bag right side out. And again, poke out those corners and trim any loose threads you might see. And so you'll see that the only raw edge we have is at the very top of that French seam, that very small portion. You could add some fray check to that to prevent the fraying, or you can see on another bag I made, I sewed the French seam first and then encased it in the seam of the drawstring opening. As you see here, the top of that seam is just under that drawstring opening, but this does make for a bulkier seam, so just know that. And you can see that bulk here. So finally, to add the drawstring, I'm using some macrame cord that I had on hand. You can use ribbon or twine, whatever you have. And I'm going to use a safety pin to feed it through the opening. I measured about 3 times the length of that opening, and we're going to feed it from one side through and then through the other side and back to where we started. And then we'll just add a little knot on the end. And then for the second string, we're going to start on the opposite end from where the knot is, so that the knotted ends are on either side of the bag. So here is our finished drawstring bag, and you can use these for all kinds of things: gifts, storage, travel, whatever you feel. And I'll show you a larger one that I made to use as a bread bag, made from some linen fabric. And this is perfect for 1 loaf of bread, so your bread doesn't go stale if you're making homemade bread. So leave a comment below with how you think you might use these and what you want to sew next. And I will see you in the next one.